This is the Psychological-Archetypal school of tarot interpretation. And in these cards, really, it's not so much the tarot as the tarot is more of a structure to create images, to spark things in you. It can become very Rorschach. The idea is that it spawns associations in your own mind, either through ideas, images, and so forth. So, for example, we have the, may seem like an odd inclusion, but it's the Via Tarot. And the Via Tarot has a lot more to do with the aspects of the Ordo Templi Orientis. I'm sure I murdered it. At any rate, the idea is being part of that mystical, magical order and your process through it. And this card here, the Hierophant, shows one of their, from what I understand, one of their rituals. And it looks like one, of course, where a person is going from death into life. They're waking up to new possibilities. And there's probably the master of the temple, being overseen by maybe members of the outer and inner order or something of this nature, or maybe brothers and sisters. And the idea is that it integrates those aspects of your religious life, at least especially the American version of the OTO, I understand it's very religious, in with your personal development. Again, much more meditative. Do you hear that? This isn't really something you work with querents with, unless you're talking about just yourself, where you're both querent and reader. Again, like the Nine of Swords here is the moon in Libra in the Jungian tarot, and so it's the idea of sharing. And so what would sharing be in your mind? What is that? What do those images conjure up, and so forth? Another type of deck, that's much more of an oracle deck, technically, is Caroline Myss's archetype deck. And this is a lot of personal work, and so the idea is she says you have to have 12 different archetypes at least in you, and you look through these, and the idea, she says, is there's no one that's all good. For example, the student, humility and devotion to knowledge, openness to lifelong learning, but arrogance in the pursuit of destructive knowledge, unwillingness to translate knowledge into action, all talk, no walk, as we saw with some of the translations of the the Seven of Swords. And so networker, and then she even gives blank cards at the end for you to put in your own archetype. And so by not being literal, again, I think that's probably the biggest aspect of the archetypal psychological type school, is not having a literalism when you come to these things, and being very free-flowing, I don't know if you've ever seen the TAT. You don't say tat as in cat or tattoo, but it's TAT, Thematic Apperception Test, in which you see images. And in the second session with the person, these are a week apart, you show, usually it's a man, and you do this to a male, and it shows a man, and he's got his hands, and his face is his hands, and there's a woman half naked lying in a bed, and then you ask the person, so what's going on? Tell me a story. Well, he just murdered her, or he raped her, or it could be, he loves her so much, but he's such a deadbeat he can't provide for her. And it tells you so much more about the person than obviously anything with the picture itself. And that's sort of the idea. There is always an aspect of projection with tarot cards, or oracle cards, or any of this. And with the psychological archetypal decks, that comes to the fore. These types of decks push that to high gear. They throw it up into fifth, or crank it down into third for sudden acceleration, and you find yourself in fifth before you know it. And those are sort of the aspects of what goes on with it. They can be very visceral, very powerful, and it really helps lead into a very similar type of school with this, and that is also the personal school of tarot interpretation.